to, okay, got it. All right, so today we're doing session 5, and we are still on the topic of where do we start, how do we start an ISM, International Students Ministry. So the first few sessions I've been talking about the culture, how to reach across, some of the tips in how to be hospitable. So last week you spent a lot of time, last 2 weeks you spent a lot of time on how to do hospitality. And so now we're starting with the first day of your ministry, right? I recommend that you start in August because that's when the students start coming in Canada, and for fall term in September. So getting the word out, you're going to start a ministry. You start in August when the students are coming in, they need a lot of help from you. And then you send out your flyers, your posters, your websites, whatever it is, social media. Young people today are into social media of all sorts, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And then we may actually create forums, either physical or online forums where they can meet, and then they can say, oh, there is such a ministry going on. So your publicity, whichever is appropriate in your situation. I think some of the churches I work with, they try to announce the start of the ministries by going to the bus stops and giving out flyers. The only problem is, of course, you've got your church name and you've got your phone number, and then the students may just throw it on the ground and you are responsible for helping to litter the place. So perhaps in these days, social media might be the way to reach out, and creating online forums. Some of my co-workers, they would, for example, create a Exchange Toronto or language exchange online forum, and then people sign up for language exchange or just to get to know Toronto, and for your case, Montreal, and then you sign them up and then give them activities. In fact, there was a Taiwanese student who was working with me, and he created a forum just for Taiwanese students in Toronto, and it was a huge, I mean, it got very popular, and a lot of Taiwanese students and immigrants and all, they signed up. Right, so the other thing actually more effective is word of mouth. You ask the students in your church to invite their friends, the schoolmates, people they meet at work. I have a co-worker who used to work in the Toronto Town Council, and she services, the citizens, and when she sees a foreigner, Japanese, Korean, whatever, she would give them her own phone number so that they can contact her for help. So you could send it out by word of mouth to your neighbors, to your neighborhood, and of course, Christian agencies may want to help you spread the word. So for example, especially if you're in a big denomination that is worldwide, you're Anglican, maybe you get the message out to the Anglican Church in Seoul. Hey, any of your students coming to Toronto, to Montreal, please let us know. In August, you begin with fun activities to introduce them to your ministry. And so you may begin with ESL classes, English as a second language, at every level, conversational or formal classes. You have the, very popular in March, maple syrup outing, that's in March. But in August, you could do other things that are fun in summer, Niagara Falls. In Toronto, we have Peterborough Locks. In Ontario, different cities, you've got different attractions, yeah? So you could organize those things. In Montreal, I'm sure you have got your equivalent fun things to do, and I know you just had a fun picnic on the 1st July. So in winter, as you plan activities for winter, ice fishing, skating on the river or the lake, these are all very popular activities. winter sports like skiing and skating and street hockey and so on. All right, so these are the things you can do: popular events, picnics, festivals, and festivals will be things like they miss from home, Chuseok Festival, Lunar New Year Festival, whatever festivals they celebrate at home, Children's Day, and so on. And when you have an event, you could follow up by getting their addresses, the contact numbers, so you can call them again and continue the friendship. And of course, tell them about your future activities. One of the things that can be done, it's very difficult. The one of the things that some churches do is they meet with international student officers or the student union officers. These officers tend to be very suspicious of what you're trying to do, and they're supposed to protect the students from proselytizing. They don't want you to go and corner them and preach the gospel and so on. So I think you need to establish a relationship with these officers. In Toronto, in the University of Toronto, one church, what they did was they volunteered to help with the student orientation. And the student union, they have orientation every year, and they need lots of manpower, need lots of financial resources and so on. And they just volunteered and say, hey, we want to help you. We are from a church nearby. We're not doing this to preach the gospel or whatever you are afraid of. And so initially very cautious, and then eventually it became a standard feature of the youth student union. They would always call up the church to help them. And of course, the church did not operate under the church name. They had a separate name that they used, which also helped them to rope in other churches in Toronto to be involved. So you offer unconditional help. You tell the student union officers or the international student office that, hey, we are not going to corner them, bring them to church and so on. What we are really interested in is helping them. So we organize airport pickup. If you know your students coming and you need to pick them up, you need to meet them, we're happy to volunteer. And you can send somebody to come along with us to make sure that we are not doing things that you don't like us to do. So picking up students and sending, of course, if you know them already, when they're leaving, you can send them to the airport. Moving help, helping the students move. Things are bulky, even moving in, some of them need mattresses and pillows and stuff like that. So they need help and they need transport. Or initially, especially grocery shopping for the things they need for the school year, and so on and so forth. Now, so with student officers, student union officers, they are very suspicious. As I say, you need to, perhaps sometimes the best way to do it, if you have someone who works in there, they can assure their colleagues, hey, we're going to do this really to help them. There was a church, for example, that was worshiping at one time. They were worshiping on campus. They rented a room on campus, and since the university already knew them, they said, hey, when the students start moving, we've got vans, we've got trucks, and we want to help them move in or move out. And I think it's important when you work with these officers that you commit yourself and promise and keep the promise that you will not proselytize, meaning your purpose is not to share the gospel with them primarily, right? I don't think there's a problem. Some churches think it's a problem. We must do everything. We must do it with this intention to share the gospel with them. Yeah, I know, but there are many ways of doing that. I mean, you don't have to say, I've got you now stuck in my truck, and for the next 2 hours, I'm going to help you move, and I'm going to preach the gospel to you until you get sick. You don't have to do that. In fact, you turn them off and scare them away when you do that. So become friends first, and then earn a right to speak to them the word of God. You can organize student clubs. In fact, some of the churches I work with, that's what they do. They go to the student office and say, we want to, and this you need to have students who are already Christians who are working with you, either from a church or you have met them and you get them together. And for example, in Seneca College, we found out that you need 7 students to form a student club. And so we got 7 students together, Christians, and say, hey, you guys, you start a student club and we will be behind you. And it doesn't have to be even a Bible study club or a Christian Union club. You know, it could be just, for example, art appreciation club. And those who come for art appreciation, you have lots of paintings painted by Christians and with Christian themes and all that. You could have appreciation of those art pieces too, and in a very gentle way, preach the gospel. But it doesn't all have to be so, you know, oriented towards sharing the gospel. You can just enjoy art because God gave us talents to enjoy art and talented artists to draw these things for us to enjoy. So organizing student clubs, anything that you feel would help. If you want to organize a stamp club or harmonica club or whatever it is that works for students these days, right? Uh, and some of my co-workers, they do this. All universities and colleges have campus chaplains, and you know, just sign up for it. Go and find out how you can be a campus chaplain or an ESL teacher. One of the churches I work with, they have this lady. She's actually not even an English teacher. She's a retired engineer, and she went to the University of Toronto and said, I would like to teach. She discovered that, for example, the foreign fellows, you know, the professors who come over to Toronto, they are fellows in U of T for a year. They write good academic papers in English, but they can't speak because typically they are either too shy to speak, or their accents or their vocabulary or whatever it is lacking. So they find it very hard to interact with native speakers. So this engineer, she's a white Canadian. She says, hey, you know, I am going to make use of the fact that I'm a white Canadian and I'm a native speaker, and I would be very welcome. So she actually taught for many years a special module for professors and scholars who are attached to the University of Toronto. And the university pays for it. Yeah. So, and she got to know these people and invited them to the church activities and so on. Okay. And of course, many of you have got churches where you have university and college staff or faculty. Rope them in and help them, ask them to help you get into the campus. And if nothing else, to send out word that you've got a ministry to help the students. Now, where students are concerned, you have a priority list. The first thing they want is food. They want to have lots of food. Free food is best, right? So that attracts them a lot. Secondly, fun. So you'll have fun activities, going to Niagara Falls, going to a movie, going to karaoke night. And freebies, they love freebies. You give them lots of free things, gifts. When they come for my movie night, we have quizzes, or festivals, we have quizzes. When they answer the questions correctly, they get free gifts. You know, doesn't like a free gift? Yeah. And they then come because they have started making friends, and they will come just because of their friends, not because of a Bible study or whatever it is. So because they become part of the family, and they feel that this is part of the community they are in Montreal, and so you give them a place to hang out, a place to connect. That's what they want. So food, fun, freebies, friends, and family, and eventually into the family of faith. So faith may well look like the last priority for them. It's okay. Some of them, they are interested right from the beginning. They come because they want to find out more about Christianity, but don't expect it of everyone. Very clearly, they need academic help. Many of them come from systems where they have very intensive teaching from teachers. And then in Canada, in Montreal or Toronto, the university education is very independent, autonomous. They are thrown on their own. The lecturer tells them nothing. They feel that the lecturer tells them nothing. lecturer only raises questions and they have no answer. And they get very, very scared when, the lecturer lectures and then the professor asks a question and 10,000 hands go up and they don't even know they don't even understand the question. So they get very intimidated because, oh no, I'm so dumb. My classmates obviously know the answers. Every one of them is fighting to give the answer. And here I am, I don't even understand the question. So I think some of these things, they get very overwhelmed, and it's good to help them adjust to a different system of studying, of academic study. What helps them with the daily living, with the survival skills? In Montreal, they are very fortunate. Almost everything that is fun is on a subway line. In Toronto, it's less so, but you are going to be very useful if you show them how to live the daily lives. In the University of Toronto, we teach them how to use the underground pathways because you don't need to get up on the street and be cold. You just do your shopping in the underground pathways. And so survival skills, how to survive in winter, how to stay warm. If your landlord turns down the heat, what's the minimum required by law, things like that. They need to know so that they can protect themselves. And I mentioned from the very first session, we are here to create happy memories for them so that when they remember Montreal, they remember also the happy times they have with their church or with your ISM ministry. So happy memories. And even if they don't become Christians, they remember that Christians were very kind to them. And it's like myself, when I was 17, I was on an exchange, high school exchange in Oregon. I was an anti-Christian. And I was not even, interested in Christianity. I was against it. But essentially, I stayed with a Christian family. They gave me happy memories. They didn't force me to go to church. They just invited me, and I went when I felt like going. So I felt very independent about it. But I had happy memories of all the things I did with the family, or even what we call earworms, songs. They go to church and they have all these catchy, nice songs, and it rings in your ears. And then many years later, this is real. I mean, I've actually had a non-Christian who says, I heard this tune in my head and it just kept on going and going. I had no idea what the song was. I knew it was probably something I heard in Canada. And, they can do search on Spotify or whatever music programs they have. And they did a search and the tune came out and it was Amazing Grace. And this person became a Christian listening to the words of Amazing Grace all over again. So yeah, it just cannot underestimate, all right, the things that songs, especially good Christian songs, can do in reaching out to people who need Christ. So I mentioned a lot of events in the previous slides. You've got ESL classes, you can have conversation classes. In Toronto, my mentor, Pastor Joseph Sabunji, started something that he started in Boston when he was ISM minister there, and he carried over to Toronto, and he calls it Golden Tutors, because there are a lot of seniors in the golden years. They are lonely, they need company, and they're native speakers. So, you organize students, match students with them, and they just talk.
Yeah,
and
Pastor Sika, are you flipping over your slides, because we don't see any change from the slides?
I am.
We don't see any change from the slides.
Others having the same problem? You are, huh?
Yeah.
Let me try again and share.
Yeah.
You see my screen?
Yeah, but it's small. It's not big enough. Yeah.
All right, I'll open up. Okay, it's big now, right?
Yeah.
You see the changes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm here talking about different conversations. So golden tutors, the senior citizens would talk to the students. It's just 1 hour talk about anything. It could also be organized, and so you could say, for example, today we have a sheet that deals with the theme. Today is shopping at Walmart, and so maybe you got a role play. The senior plays the role of the assistant at Walmart, and the student plays the student, yeah, shopping at Walmart, and they can talk and they pretend they're buying things and selling things, right? So you have a conversation with a topic. And next week we are going to talk about how to buy clothes in a thrift shop, and so on. How to speak to your tutor in school, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can have conversation topics, and you have outings, your festival celebrations, and they don't have to be just Christian celebrations like Christmas and Easter, but other things like Canada Day. Yeah, you just had a Canada Day picnic. And students, of course, are very energetic, so they would love sports and games. So do it for them, help them. And sometimes, they are not familiar with American sports like basketball, curling, lacrosse, American football, Canadian football, things like that. Yeah, ice hockey. Or you can have non-American sports. They come to America, they come to Canada, and they say, why doesn't anybody play soccer? And why is it only girls playing soccer? Things like that. So you can actually have games which they're familiar with, ping pong, cricket, badminton. Now, I used to organize cricket here in Singapore. And when you organize cricket, you get all the South Asians come, the Indians, Sri Lankans, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, and so on. They just come because they love cricket. All right. So that's one way to draw certain groups of students. And having camps and retreats, you can do it in tents, or you can do it at a resort center, a retreat center. And I'm sure you have them in Quebec also. And so these retreats, I find them very useful because it's a weekend, maybe 3-4 days together, and very intensive. And you get lots of time together, and this is when you can share with them your lives and your stories. And very often, after every retreat, I get 3 or 4 students who say, I have become a Christian, I want to be baptized. And so other things, movies, hiking. And I mentioned before that even with a movie or a karaoke, you can actually slip in the gospel and teachings from the word of God. Because, for example, a movie may have a theme, and the theme may be about revenge, it may be about love, and the Bible has lots to say about all these things. Or even karaoke, it doesn't have to be just Christian songs, but of course, when there's a Christian song, I find especially when hymns are being sung, I teach them, because hymns are in very ancient English and they have no idea what they're singing. So it's a good chance to say, hey, let me explain this hymn to you. Or even just modern contemporary hymns, you can explain the context why people sing those songs, right? And that's how you can very gently, very subtly fit in the gospel. And what I do in Toronto, in London, UK, in Boston, in other places I've done ISM, it's always very fun and very interesting to organize something for the students to showcase their talents. So I would call it International Night, and some students will cook their national meals, some students will sing their national songs or dances, but some of them just simply do, oh yeah, you can play, I've got students who are very good at piano and they play a Chopin, or play, a Handel, some piece that is classic in Western culture, and they just love to showcase their talents. And so the church gets to hear about the students ministry, because that's one thing one reason I organize an international night, for example, in People's Church, because the members have never heard that there was such a ministry. And when they realized there was such a ministry, I got more support from church members, both volunteers and money, because they say, hey, I've been in this church for so many years, I didn't know there was such a ministry, because you're so quiet in the one corner of the church. So I organized an international night, and they see the students perform, and they come to love the culture, they come to love the students. And, it is very good to have a mix of unique North American experiences, and to also help them stop their homesickness by doing things that are cultural in their own context. So Lunar New Year celebration, Chuseok, Mid-Autumn Festival celebration, and so on. So I do have colleagues who are Canadians, for example, and they were very insistent. Look, these students come to North America, they need to know how to survive as North Americans and have the experience of eating pizza and cheese and stuff like that they don't like. I say, yeah, I know. You can let them taste. You can let them, savor it once in a while. But if they don't like it, they don't like it. Don't force it on them. And so you need to say, hey, yes, while I want to introduce you to things Canadian because you're in Canada, I'm also sensitive to the fact that when you look at cheese, you think of worms, you think of smells, and you want to vomit. I mean, Canadian growing up with cheese would love cheese, just like Chinese growing up in China would love preserved eggs. Like, it's normal. But the Canadian, looking at it, goes, ah! And actually, there is this reality TV show, Fear Factor, and I laughed one season when they had this Fear Factor, a program where they put the competitors to fearsome situations. And so it may be walking on a tightrope across Niagara Falls, or, fearful things like that. And this season they had eating of century eggs. And I go, oh, you should send me there. I will win this competition, because they were all, trying to eat, and they look at the green yolk, it's supposed to be yellow. They look at a black egg, and it's supposed to be white, and they just started vomiting. So yeah, just remember that what you love in your culture, somebody else may find totally obnoxious and irksome, right? So please be sensitive, and you want to create happy memories, not horrible memories. And I think it's always good, whatever event you have, begin or end with a meal, whether it's dinner or lunch. And let's say even apple picking, I bring them to apple picking, and I have whole day fun things to do at picking apples. At the end of the session, I bring them to a house nearby the orchard, because they've got friends all over the place. And we go to the friend's house. It's got a big enough house to take 30-40 students. And we would have lunch there, barbecue lunch. And after that, we have programs. So I think Ju remembers, because her husband, John, was in George Brown learning how to cook, how to, hospitality and so on. And he taught the students how to make apple pie. And so you got all these people gathering around the oven, or not all, only those interested, and they are learning how to make apple pie. And when the pie is made, all of us got around and say, hey, now let's eat the apple pie that was made for us. So everybody joins in, and we can have a short session before you eat of singing, or maybe after, singing Christian songs, slipping in a short message about the meaning of the words, meaning of the event that they have participated in from a Christian perspective, or even things like the meaning of life, what it's like. Life is like an apple, whatever it is that you can do. And then you invite them to your other activities. And I think for many international students, they have a thing against church. They will never go to a church, but when you invite them to a home, they are very often very happy to go. Okay, and if you have a home near the apple orchard, that's good. But maybe you don't, then you can organize the dinner or the sing-song session, whatever it is, at the nearest church, the church near to the destination of your outing. And I don't want to talk about this one, but if you have a big group, you could organize a bus or a convoy of different vehicles. So many volunteers needed, 3 or 4 cars, each carrying 7 people, and you can go on a convoy. Now, I want to just stop here for a while and ask if you have any questions. I don't want to just keep on talking. You could, ask questions, make your comments, share your experiences. Anyone?
Actually, I have one. Sorry, from the recent one during the Canada Day. Let's say if somebody wanted to accept Christ on the spot, will you lead the person in the prayer, or you just hand it over to the church?
Yeah, if someone comes to Christ, I mean, you have got this long bus journey, or get together, and then this person says, something, I want to become a Christian. Yeah, straight away, it's good to lead the person into a prayer and explain the commitment they've just made. And then if it's your church event, of course, you introduce them to the pastor next to prepare for baptism. If it's not your church, it's nice to be, I'm a guest also at this church outing. I refer it to the church that's organizing it. Unless, of course, in my case, I work with different churches. There could be 3 or 4 different churches in one outing. I would just say, whoever has confessed Christ to you, you bring that person to your church. I don't really care. I work for God's kingdom. I don't work for any specific church. So that's okay with me. And I've got students who come to Christ and they don't get baptized in my church. I just make sure they get baptized, that's all. Some church.
Okay, let's say if in the home, then how? Let's say if we organize like a dinner at home, and then somebody accepted Christ, then what should we do? Any advice?
I think I would say very openly, okay, you let me pray with you and let me explain to you what you've committed yourself to. And I believe, you can say, I believe that one of the things we must do is to join into the family of God, a community that that becomes our family in Christ. And so, have you got any church in mind? And they may actually have a church in mind. And if not, then say, hey, come to my church, or you are the host, come to my church. I will let you see. And they may not like your church, then you can say, yeah, let me help you find a church. Sometimes people have different comfort levels. Maybe they find a Presbyterian church too rigid and they want to go to a Pentecostal church, or the other way around, they find a Pentecostal church too vibrant, they want to have a quiet church. You help them. You don't have to channel them into one box and then say, now because I'm a Pentecostal, you are a Pentecostal. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Hendra?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
But of course, if you are, as I said, you are host. Okay, let's say in the Apple situation, you are the host family near to the apple orchard. But if the student come to Christ, they may be students in Toronto and you are in Whitfield. How do you ask them to come to your church? Your church, you take 2 hours by bus just to get, by car just to get there. So I think it is always important to say, I may be the host, but if a Christian comes to, if non-Christian comes to Christ in my home, I want to link up with the pastor that organized this and say, hey, pastor, here's your student. She has become a Christian.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? And Ju, maybe you want to share something if you are comfortable, because I just mentioned John, your husband, and the fun things we did together.
I'm
Yeah.
so enjoying for listening about the activities. I am the beneficiary of the activities, even though I am much older than those students, but it was a really, really good memory for me. And then without these activities, my experience for 5 years Canadian life is not that meaningful. So and then with these activities, my husband got become a Christian. So and then most of activities I have. I was experienced, so I'm now I really feel the activities is a much more good memory for me. So now it is a really good time for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ju. Thank you for your sharing. You see, for those of you who do not know, Ju and John came to Toronto. John, as I said, was studying in Judge Brown. So they are older students. You know, they are students who may not be in the 20s and 30s. It could be in their 40s. They're trying to learn a new thing. Maybe they're trying to also emigrate to Canada and so on. So John and Ju spent time in Toronto with us, and we created happy memories for them. John was a non-Christian when he came, and I baptized him before he went home. So yeah, we praise God. And John is serving now in his church, and John and Ju are both still dedicated followers of Jesus Christ. So thank God for that. Right. Any other questions? If not, we'll take a break, and we come back at 9:30. So one last chance. Any question, anyone? Okay, then let's come back at 9:30. Okay, so I talked about culture in the first session. I want to say a bit more about cultures. One category of cultures would be the face and shame cultures. These are cultures where it's very important to make sure that people don't get embarrassed in public. This is what they call face. You know, they don't lose their face. They don't look stupid. They don't get exposed to ridicule and so on. Right. So face and shame cultures, East Asian cultures particularly, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, they are non-confrontational. They don't like to argue in front of people. They don't like to be argued against. They don't like to fight. They don't want to appear even to be fighting. So it is very usual, for example, to find, say, maybe two Australians and two Americans. They will argue until their faces go red and blue. And after that, they say, okay, let's agree to disagree and let's go for a drink. And they remain friends. But in an East Asian culture, in a face culture, you argue with a friend a bit more aggressively than before, you have lost your friend. So, you come from a culture that loves talking and arguing. Try not to argue with somebody who comes from an opposite culture, a non-confrontation culture. And do avoid publicly shaming someone or scolding someone if they have done something wrong. Pull them aside and quietly say, you just did something that's not acceptable in Canada. Can you please remember that? Right? And not so much as to scold them, especially if they are older than you. It's one of the taboos in a shame culture to be shamed by a younger person, right? And maybe that's also one reason why, for example, when a Korean first meets you, the Korean wants to know how old you are, right? Because they want to know whether you're an older person or a younger person. If you're an older person, they cannot shame you. So conformity, we actually, especially in Canadian culture, we are non-conformists. It's a cultural thing to say, I am, who I am. None of your business. It's my life. So we want to be different. We're individualistic in Canada, but in conformist cultures like the East Asian cultures, you want to be the same. you want to be the same as everybody else. So apparently there's a Japanese proverb that says, if a nail sticks out, bang it in. So culture in Japan expects you to be the same as everybody. And when we ask them to become Christians, we're actually asking them to stick out. And they are very, very uncomfortable about sticking out. That's why it's probably one of the reasons why it's difficult to ask an East Asian to leave their community and their culture and become Christians. And this is where I always emphasize to my East Asian students that they are not leaving the culture. I'm not asking them to leave the culture. And I always say it is fine to keep your culture. Culture is human, yeah, but it is important, of course, as a Christian to decide which aspects of our culture are unbiblical and to redeem it, meaning you don't throw it away, but you can make it more acceptable as a Christian. So in Chinese culture, for example, Chinese New Year, we have, we will stick up posters in a way, right? Banners on the doorways, on top and on the side. And these banners would have, good luck phrases, wishing health, wishing wealth, wishing everything good. And so when we become a Christian, we don't say we throw away those banners. We still put them up on our doorways. And I always point out that when the Jews were leaving Egypt in Exodus, the Passover, they were told to paint blood on the doorways. Yeah. And it's essentially, it's like what the Chinese are doing, right? Instead of blood, now there's red paper on the doorways and all the good wishes. So it's like, what the Jews did at Passover. And so I said, what do we do then? Our phrases are biblical phrases, asking God for blessing, and maybe even scripture verses from the Bible, so that it is, the culture is redeemed. We are not asking for good luck and lots of money anymore, but we're asking for blessings of God. Okay, so we can still practice the aspects of our culture, and sometimes even not just redeem them, but elevate them. So when my father, when I became a Christian, my father was anti-Christian, right? He brought me up to be anti-Christian. He says, now you're no longer Chinese. I said, no, father, I'm even more Chinese. You know why? Because one of the primary values of Chinese culture is honor your father. And I told my father, in the Bible, it's the fifth commandment. After the first four commandments about honoring God and respecting God and worshiping God, the fifth commandment, the first human commandment, is honor your parents. And I said, this is an even higher value than Chinese culture, because now I'm going to be even more Chinese, because I not only honor my father, I honor my mother, and I honor them whether they're good or bad. In Chinese culture, it is often an excuse to say my parents are so bad, that's why I don't honor them. But in the Bible, I told my father, no matter how your parents or what your parents are, you honor them. It is absolute. It has no excuse, no exception. So my culture is redeemed or elevated and becomes something that I'm proud of even more. Now, in faith and shame cultures, usually, as a professor in Singapore, and even here on the screen, I asked, do you have any questions? And nobody has a question, because in a public context, very few people want to ask questions. Maybe because they don't want to be ashamed, they ask a stupid question, everybody laughs, or maybe they just feel I don't want to show off, because if I ask a good question, everybody go, oh, good question, and then I feel proud, and no, I'm not supposed to be proud. So I think sometimes in cultures where Canada, for example, you, as I said, the professor, even before he asks a question, 10,000 hands go up and say, I have a question. The students have a question. So we are so different. And so just to be remembering that For many, and I say this to some of you who are Asians, if you have been Asian but 30 years in Canada, you've forgotten how to be Asian or forgotten how Asians behave. Just remind yourself. I have friends who have been 30, 40 years in Canada, and they're so Canadian, they don't remember these things, even though they're Asian originally. So one-to-one is what makes Asian cultures comfortable, and therefore, that's how you share the gospel too. You do it one-to-one. And shame works better than guilt in Christian culture, especially in North American Christian culture. There's always this emphasis on you have done something against God and you are guilty of offending God. Presenting the gospel to an East Asian very often works better if you present shame rather than guilt. If you do this thing, you leave your wife and you go for an affair, the shame to your family, the shame to your parents, the shame to your ancestors is really not worth it. So the shame works better than saying you are guilty of offending God. Yeah, so what? So I think this is how differences can be enjoyed rather than avoided. And in face cultures, you don't attack, and you don't be a defensive either. So I have had to tell one of my coworkers, and we were on an outing, and she sat next to this non-Christian and started attacking Chinese culture. She's Chinese, she's from Hong Kong, but she said, I'm not Chinese. A lot of Hong Kongers say, I'm not Chinese, So she says, I'm not Chinese. And then she started attacking China, and I said, no, you don't do that. You don't say Canada is so great and China is so horrible. Even if you really think so, that's not the occasion. You are going to turn away this person. You may win a debate and you may prove that China is really horrible. And that's why you left Hong Kong, I guess. But you are going to you win this debate and lose the soul. And it's the same thing with apologetics. Apologetics is very Western in that you attack a position and you defend your position. When you want to be relational and you want East Asian to be comfortable in conversation, don't attack, don't confront, don't shame them, and don't be defensive. Okay, now there are some cultures that are obligation heavy. East Asian cultures is, particularly so. They rely only on family. You don't ask people to do things for you, you ask your family to do things for you. And this is where I often encourage them to think, now you're a Christian, you have a new family in God, you're not asking strangers, you're not asking friends, you're asking your family when you need help. Okay. Obligation heavy cultures are averse to strangers. They don't like strangers. They don't talk to strangers. They teach the children to avoid strangers. And so they are very nervous when you try to be too kind to them, right? You're trying to be kind as a nice Canadian Christian, and they are really scared of you. What agenda have you got? What's your motivation? So be careful that you really appear genuine, but don't be too pushy. At the same time, I find Canadians the opposite. They are non-pushy at all. Okay, meaning like this, we have this Japanese Christian, she needed help. We all knew that, and we all go and offer help. If you need help, call on us. Now, Canadians will do that and leave it to your initiative. But an obligation heavy culture says, no, I'm not going to call you, even if you offered. So yeah, I hear you say, call on you when I need help, but I won't call when I need help because I don't want to be obligated to you. You see, the thing is this, in my culture, it works like this. Yeah, they would say, if you do me a favor, let's say you buy me a Coke, it's 20 cents, I have to buy you another Coke another day, 20 cents. And maybe I have to buy you 2 Cokes twice to tell you I'm really grateful. And so there's this obligation escalation, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and soon it's a bottle of champagne rather than a Coke that I return to you. So escalation. And so they are afraid of escalation, and therefore they don't even start. They don't want to ask you. So one of my Korean co-workers actually said to this Japanese girl, I'm going to help you. And what she did was she waited and she didn't get a call. So then she cooked up a dish and brought the dish to the doorstep, ring the bell and say, here I am. I've got a dish for you. Take it. And it was taken, right? Because again, the shame culture, you don't turn down somebody who's at the door. So I think it's important to know that these are obligations that they feel they have to return. And so one of the things I always say is, this is Christian giving. It's unconditional. It does not expect return. There is no ROI. There is no return. And we are comfortable with that. So we have to teach our new Christians from obligation heavy cultures that you no longer have obligations, you have family. And these expectations can be moderated and changed. So payback, yeah, they expect payback, and you have to teach that gift giving is different from payback. I bring a Christmas gift. I bring a little gift. I'm a guest. You are inviting me to your home. I bring a small gift. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a Rolex watch, you know, because I'm giving you a small little dinner. And in obligation gift giving cultures, there's this need to know the degree of proximity, meaning, are you close to me or are you far away? So if I'm invited to your wedding and I only knew you from, you know, the register in class, I'm your teacher and I don't know you any more than that, maybe my gift can be a very small gift. But if I was, you know, your roommate for 3 years and we were, you know, we were really, really close, I'm expected to give a bigger gift. So your degree of proximity dictates how much you should give. When you first meet somebody, you know, sometimes also the status they have. If they are high ranking, you're supposed to give them a bigger gift. If they're low ranking, a smaller gift. So yes, I think for students, it's easier because they are not high ranking and they are not close. They are strangers when they come to your ministry. You can begin to teach them that the gift giving expected in Canadian culture is just tokenism, right? I bring a bottle of wine. I bring, you know, a book, nothing very big, $5, $10 is all we need. We don't need to buy a Rolex watch, bring a Mercedes, right, to give away. So that is the thing that we need to teach and to bear in mind when we give gifts. Now, hierarchy-oriented cultures. That's why Koreans, as I said, will ask you the first meeting, how old are you? And Canadians go, why are you prying into my privacy? I'm not going to tell you how old I am, right? Because they need to know whether you are higher or lower than them in the hierarchy. They need to know whether you are an elder, a peer, or a junior, right? And in fact, originally Chinese cultures like that, less so now, and very, very little of that in Singapore, even though we are ethnically Chinese. So we get affected by Western culture too. But an unaffected hierarchy-oriented culture needs to know, because if you are older than me, I have to call you a certain thing, your oppa, you know, your Luna, whatever, you have a name for that higher ranking person. So you need to know how old they are. Now, because they respect authority, they respect an elder person. You are an elder person. I am an elder person. The good and bad of that. The good and bad. The good part of it is they look up to me like a surrogate father. My wife is a surrogate mother. They respect us and they listen to us. Unfortunately for the gospel, yeah, and it's unfortunate, it's that sometimes it's not a real conversion when you ask them, do you believe in Jesus? Of course I believe in Jesus because you believe in Jesus, so I believe in Jesus. And that is really because I respect you so much. So what question do I have? I don't know. I have lots of questions, but because you say so, I will be so. So sometimes we wonder, is that a real conversion to Jesus Christ, or is it because I love my teacher says so, I will be so. Or sometimes they may want to win your favor, they want to make you feel happy so that they can get something out of you. These are things that we have to worry about, but I think when we share the gospel, we just let God's word, the Bible, work. We don't care whether we work or we are convincing or not. So it's good to emphasize, of course, your faith must be in Jesus Christ, not in me. I'm your teacher. Yes, you love me and respect me, but have your faith in Jesus, not in me. And I think in this case, then if I'm an elder, I want to make sure that I am not unintentionally taking advantage of their respect, or they are honoring me and making them do things which they wouldn't want to do actually. And the other thing to note is this: I always tell my students, you can call me anything that makes you comfortable. Some in Canadian culture, you go by names, right? So some call me by name, they're comfortable with that. I teach in the National University in Singapore, the Nanyang University. I've got students in my MBA and PhD who are in the 40s, and I tell them, call me Sikiat, and they never call me Sikiat. They will call me Professor Sikiat, they will call me Dr. Sikiat, they call me Dr. To, Professor To. They will never downplay the formality that I am a doctor and a professor. So what happens then is I say, yeah, okay, I respect that. You want to feel comfortable, call me Dr. To, Dr. Sikiat, I'm okay. So don't downplay. I mean, Canadian sense, don't do that, don't do that. And yeah, okay, if they're comfortable, they become more Canadian, they would not do that. But don't force it. Relationship-based cultures. Relationships need time to build. And it's so sad when I heard a friend of mine say friends are a waste of time. So he doesn't have friends because he says friends are a waste of time. Yeah, in a way, you need to cultivate a friendship. You need time, and therefore time is precious. You want to make money out of it. You don't want to make friends. Fine. But I think it's a very, very wrong value. In all cultures, many cultures, maybe less so in Western cultures now, friends are important, relationships are important. You do things, it's very transactional. If I give you $10, you give me $10. But when you have a relationship, the relationship is not transactional. I do something for you, I don't expect it to be returned back to me, the same value at the same time. Now, time needed means you have to have an understanding of the value of time in different cultures. There's something I mentioned in the first lesson about polychronic time and monochronic time. Monochronic time is Canadian time. It's sharp. It is to the point. If I say 4 o'clock, it is nothing less and nothing more. It is 4 o'clock sharp. I want to see you 4 o'clock sharp is a point. Time is a point. But in many cultures, time is polychronic. It's not a point, it's a range. 4 o'clock means, roughly 3:45 to 4:15, 4:30, and maybe 5 o'clock. I took some time to get here because the bus is late, but we're not so religious about time. So you get very frustrated being a Canadian in a monochronic time culture, waiting for somebody who is polychronic. I give an example of a student who was mentoring, and it's 4 p.m. every week on a Saturday. And so I'm waiting at 4 o'clock, and it's 5 o'clock, and it's 6 o'clock, and he's not around. And then he turns up at 6 o'clock. And I said, why didn't you call me? Yeah, because you can make it at 4. Call me, tell me not to wait. Tell me you're coming at 6 instead of 4. And he's like, well, I was leaving my house and my landlord called out to me and said, hey, I need help here up on the roof. Can you come out and help me? And I couldn't say no to him. So I went up to the roof to help him, and it took longer than I expected. And so now it's 6 o'clock. Why didn't you call me? Well, I'm on the roof. I can't call you. Okay. So I had to teach the student that in Canadian culture, it's okay to say no. And in this case, not really a no, but to say, I am going for another appointment. I cannot do it now. Can I do it another day? Can I help you another day? Right? And I taught the student the phrase, I'll take a rain check. Right? So I'll help you another day. If you ask me to do something and I can't do it, I'll take a rain check on that and I'll do it another day. So essentially, being able to say, I have another appointment, I must keep to that, and the Canadian will understand. I have to go for an appointment at 4 o'clock. Now, in a relationship-based culture, you need to show care because care is expected in a relationship. And in fact, care is sometimes a bit exaggerated because you are expected to lean backwards, to bend all the rules for somebody who's related to you. And you might need to lower expectations to say in Canada, we don't do that. We don't lean backwards, break the rules especially, or to break the law, worst of all. Many relationship-based cultures, Canadian relationship-based cultures, you hug. You see somebody you're very familiar with, you hug. Or maybe COVID has changed that. And after COVID, maybe less hugging. But there are many cultures where they are very, very uncomfortable when you hug them. And it's not even about hugging a person of the opposite sex. It's just a non-hugging culture, right? And that's why they namaste from a distance. Right? They don't even shake hands, right? So I think you need to understand that sometimes what you think is a close relationship and therefore you hug is not the hugging culture, and therefore you don't hug. But you can ask permission, can I hug you? Can I give you a hug? And so on. Now, in relationship cultures, it's action that speaks, not words. And so we need to speak little and act more. And as I said, saying no is difficult. I don't want to break the relationship. I don't want to harm the relationship. So therefore, I don't say no. And therefore, another example I gave in the first lesson was about how the student said to me, very puzzled, my friend Arthur asked me to go to a movie and he keeps asking and I can't stop him. I don't want to go, but he keeps asking. And I already told him I don't want to go. So I said, okay, did you say no, I don't want to go? He says, because I know that culture doesn't say no, right? No, I didn't say no, N-O, but I said, when he said, would you like to go to this movie? I said, maybe. I said, there you are. To a Canadian, when you say maybe, it means I haven't made up my mind. Come see me again another time. Ask me another time. I will think about it in the meantime. Maybe. He says, but in my culture, maybe means they know straight away it's a no. I said, no, not in Canada. All right. And again, the degrees of proximity. If I am your father, my relationship is different from if I am your peer, your classmate, or if I'm a stranger at the bus stop. So the obligation is deeper, the closer the relationship. Community-centered cultures. Now, this is very important for sharing the gospel. Many of the cultures that we know are very hardened against the Christian faith. Many of them are actually community-centered. You ask this person to leave his or her culture and religion. The religion is a culture. It's a lifestyle. It is family, and you're asking them to break away from family. So that's why they don't come, because they don't break away from the family that raised them up for the last 30 years and 40 years. And now you are speaking to them in Canada and you say, you got to leave your family of 40 years. they don't and they can't. So our message must be that we are not asking them to break away. We ask them to go back. So I tell my this Japanese boy who I was sharing the gospel over the weeks and months, and finally he came to a point. Initially, he says, "I'm not a believer. I don't believe in religion. I'm a scientist," right? And slowly the faith walk was, and then he says, "Okay, I think there is a God, but I don't believe Jesus is God." And then further down the road, he says, "I think I'm open to the fact that Jesus is God, but if I become a Christian, I will lose my family, I lose my friends." And that's when I realized he's counting his cost, and I have to tell him that the cost isn't really that stark. You don't really have to leave your friends. You can go back to your friends and say, "I'm a Christian now, but you are still my friend, and I will not leave you." And if they want to leave, still it's them. They have decided to leave you because you are no longer a person they want to relate with. Well, that's their choice, their decision. But you can convince them that nothing has changed. I'm just a Christian now. That's only changed. But you are still my friend. You're still my family. You're still my sister. You're still my brother. So we are not asking them to break away. And so what I do is I tell, for example, this Japanese boy says, I drink with my friends. And I say, "What's wrong with that? You can go drink with your friends. You just don't drink alcohol. You can drink water, you can drink coffee, tea, and I'm sure they serve these non-alcoholic drinks even in the pubs that you go to, the bars that you go to. You connect with them still. You go where they go, but when they drink alcohol, you drink something else so that you can say, hey, when you're drunk, I can drive you home." So you don't break away from your friends, and you teach them how they don't need to break away from friends. We teach them to be winsome, to be more loved and lovable. So one of the students I was sharing with, she says, so I'm teaching her how to become a better daughter. When she goes home as a Christian daughter, you tell your father, "I am going to love you far more than I ever loved before, because now I am a Christian. And God teaches me to love you far more than I have actually done. So I'm sorry, Father, I'm going to do it differently this time." So you redeem rather than reject the cultural norm of loving your father, right? Because it's just, in filial piety cultures, it is to respect your father because your father raised you. But now I'm going to love you, Father, because God tells me, and I love God. And God says, love your father. So she says to me, "How do I love my father?" I said, "What are the things that your father likes to do? What are the things that your father likes to do?" And she says, "My father likes to play tennis." And I said, "Do you play tennis?" She says, "Yes, I do. My father wants and loves to play tennis with me." So I said, "Why don't you play more tennis with him then?" "No, I don't want to play tennis with him." I said, "Oh, why not?" "Because he always wants to win. He doesn't want to lose." So I said, "Well, let him win then, yeah." Let him win. And so she went back home, and my wife and I were so thrilled. We, after many years away, she went home. She came to visit us in Singapore, and she said, "My trip, I must end on Monday, because on Tuesday I promised Father I will be home to play tennis with him." Yeah. Yeah, so I think we need to teach them that they're not leaving their communities and families. They are in fact going to be even closer, because now Jesus wants them to go back to their families and win them for Christ. So this is then the idea of returning preparation. My students go home, the international student ministries, many of them do go home. What do we do to prepare them for their new faith and their, in a sense, returning to a new culture? Because now, even if they are Koreans going back to Seoul, there is this thing called a reverse culture shock. When they first came to Canada, they were shocked. When they go back home after 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, they will be shocked returning back to their own country. So we need to prepare them, the expectations, friends have moved on, they have memories you don't have, and so on. So you link them up with their home country community, a church in Seoul, a church in Tokyo, a church where they are, Christians where they are, so that they can continue in this community of faith, because community is important to them. Now, moving on to language learning difficulties. They come to Canada, they want to learn English, they speak English. I hope Ju doesn't mind saying when she came, she had good English. She had learned it in Korea, but many of us still found it difficult to understand her, and she found it difficult to understand us. But now she speaks perfect English. She speaks very good English, as you heard her. So I think it's important to know that we don't laugh at people who may speak different. I mean, after many years of speaking and learning English, sometimes I make mistakes too. And I have a problem that a lot of East Asians have, Chinese and Koreans, and Japanese, we cannot pronounce the R. So we don't say bird and girl, and it's very difficult because we don't roll our tongues for the R. We speak it more like an L, so that's why the jokes about flight lice, not fried rice, but flight lice. Well, because the L is present in our language, but the R is not. Well, the Northern Chinese would have R, yeah, but the Southern Chinese don't have the R in their language. Or even the TH sound, diphthong, as they call it in English, right? The th, the, this, those, that's not a sound present. It's just like even an English speaker, you don't have the guttural sound. So the German or the Korean, you don't have that at all. And you find it so strange. Why are they trying to, they're trying to clear the throat and spit out the phlegm, right? So just remember that there are sounds that are non-existent in their language that is present in English. And talking about sounds, you got and consonants. A consonant is a non-vowel, right? A D, G, K. So in Japanese, a lot of Japanese and Koreans, they can't just end a word on a consonant. So Christmas is Christmas, and the Japanese pronounce it as M-A-S-U. I mean, you spell it as M-A-S-U, Christmas, almost like, there's an extra syllable at the end. So Christmas rather than Christmas. Stop, cut, right? They cannot stop and cut. Very interesting example of that. I was in Japan and I was speaking in a church in Osaka. Kyoto. My student had gone back to Kyoto, and he brought me to his church, and his pastor says, "Can you preach to us?" We have a bilingual service, English and Japanese. So I said, "Yeah, I'm happy to preach." So I preached in this church in Kyoto, and what I said was translated. It was a bilingual service. And the pastor was introducing me, and he kept saying "Siketo, Siketo" in Japanese, right? Siketo, Siketo, Siketo. And I was thinking, oh, that was smart. Or maybe my students told him my last name because my last name is To. And I thought he just knew my name is Siket, and he's saying Siketo, 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 Siketo this, Siketo that. He's from Singapore. And so after that, I asked him, so, oh, you realize my last name is To? And he says, no, I don't. So why were you saying Siketo? Then I realized, because the T in my name, the Siket, is a consonant, and they cannot end on a consonant. They have to add a vowel at the end of the consonant. So T, Siket became Siketo. And that's the reason why sometimes, and the Japanese alphabet is syllabic. every alphabet has 2 letters, right? In English, you know, A, I, A, O, ka, ki, ke, ko. It's a syllable at the end of, there's a vowel at the end of the alphabet. So Japanese students find it particularly difficult to speak English when they have words with an R and words that end with a consonant. Except N. N is, you know, sikat san. So N is a consonant, but they can do that because it's present in their language. And Chinese, the Chinese have no tenses, no plurals, and it's non-alphabetic language. They struggle with an alphabetic language that has plurals and tense. In Chinese language, yeah, those of you who speak Chinese, you know, yesterday I eat, today I eat, tomorrow I eat, in the future, 20 years from now, I eat. There's no eat, eaten, ate, and so on. No tense, no plurals. I have 5 cats, I have 25 cats, I have 3,000 cats, and I have 1 cat. No plurals. So it's very difficult to come to a language where now you have to remember the tense and the plural, and the spelling is different, and so on. Problems in the English language with stresses. I remember in Oregon, when I first went to Oregon, I had studied English for 12 years, and I could speak pretty good English. I had a very good vocabulary. I had an 80,000 word vocabulary at high school, in high school. So I had no problems with English except the pronunciation. Because I realized that when I speak, sometimes my friends don't understand me. They look at me and I'm speaking English and they don't understand. And then I realized, for example, the word photograph, right? I take a photograph. And because I take a photograph, I am a photographer. The stress is different. Photograph, photographer. But I was saying photograph, photographer. And when I say photographer, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So I have to learn to stress the correct syllable, photographer. Ah, okay, I got it. So in Chinese, we don't do that. In Japanese, I don't think you do that either. Or Korean, there's no stress. It's all flat. And of course, they have to learn idioms and slang and the jargon of the profession that they're in. There's so many things they are learning. Be kind to them, be patient with them. And then, of course, there are jokes that you tell. There are inside jokes, meaning jokes from your culture, jokes because of your own political knowledge of Canada and so on, and they have no idea what you're talking about. So an example of Canadian joke. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Canada went to McDonald's and he got sick. But it's not Trudeau. So, you know, you tell a joke like that and the student go, huh? Well, the thing is this, what you're saying is that you're talking about Prime Minister, but you're not talking about Prime Minister Trudeau. You're talking about another Prime Minister, but you're making fun of the word. His name, Trudeau, sounds like it's not true, though, right? So that kind of joke, I'm not sure that's really a joke, but just to illustrate that Canadian jokes, sometimes they play on the sound of the word, the name, and so on, and the student just cannot catch what you're trying to say. Excuse me. And in fact, very funny, once listening to Charles Rice, Pastor Charles Rice in Toronto in People's Church, and he cracked a joke. Now, Pastor Charles Rice is from England, and he cracked a joke, and I laughed. And my Canadian friend looked at me and said, "Why are you laughing?" But it was a joke that needed knowledge of English culture and English habits, and that's why I understood, because I come, you know, from a British colony, and he's Canadian. He has no idea what I was talking about, what Charles Price was talking about. Okay, so finally, etiquettes, difficulties, manners. What's a good manner? So how much is that doggy in the window? You see, in Chinese culture, I know very much we do that. We have conversations, and the first thing we ask is, how much is that? So I come to Royston's house and I see a very nice vase and say, hey, Royston, this is very nice. How much is that? And Canadians don't ask, how much is that? It's rude to ask people, how much is that? Okay. But it's not rude in Chinese culture. And in fact, sometimes we're just curious that, hey, that's so beautiful. And we look for value. You see, Chinese love getting value, and it's not about, maybe sometimes it's about how much, but if you got a very nice vase and it's only $5. Wow. How did you do that? So we love bargains also, right? Value for money. Why do they ask me if I'm well and never wait for an answer? That's a common question students ask me. I go to school and I walk down the corridor and this man says, hi, John, how are you? And then he never waits for my answer. He's gone. I was going to tell him, yeah, I was sick yesterday. I had a temperature of 34 degrees and I couldn't see the doctor because the doctor was so far away. And before I could even start, he's gone. Then why do you ask me, how are you? You don't wait for my answer. So yeah, just to say, no, in Canada, when people say, how are you? They are really just saying, hi, goodbye. And I had a Japanese boy ask me, I have a very serious question. I said, what's that? It's, why do Canadians eat raw vegetables? I looked at him and I laughed and said, why do Japanese eat raw fish? You see, he didn't see that from his culture. He's eating things that are strange to Canadians too. And he's looking at Canadians eating raw vegetables and he says, vegetables are to be cooked. Why do they eat it raw? So sometimes it helps to be a cultural translator and to say, oh, well, in different cuisines, we love different things. You don't like raw vegetables. I don't like raw vegetables too. I never eat salad. I cook my vegetables too, but I eat raw fish and you eat raw fish. And a lot of Canadians are just so stunned by that, yeah? So cultural norms are very sometimes difficult to understand. Something I must say here, if you are going to host people, don't get offended by this point, the toilet paper issue. We have toilets for the students to use, of course, right? And they go in, and after, in the beginning, after Friday night, we have 20, 30 people come for Bible study, and then they leave, and the bathroom smells. And we discovered that actually people use the bathroom, they clean themselves and throw the toilet paper into the bin next to the bowl, right? You have a toilet bowl and you have a bin, and they throw all their dirty tissue paper, toilet paper into the bin. And I realized that in many developing world countries, toilets are not flush toilets. They've been taught that you throw whatever you clean into the bin, not into the bowl, because that gets clogged and choked. So I had to very subtly, very quietly put up a notice with a picture. In Canada, we throw the toilet paper into the toilet bowl and flush it. And that solved the issue. Burping and slurping. In Canada, we don't burp after we eat. We don't slurp the noodles or anything. That's rude. But in Japanese culture, if you don't slurp, if you don't burp, you're not polite. You're not telling the host, I am enjoying your food. So we need to understand that. And this one is funny. I brought the students to a maple syrup farm, and we got pancakes, and they were served pancakes with maple syrup. a bowl of maple syrup, no, a bottle of maple syrup, and little tubs. And the students look at the maple syrup and they say, "What's this for? Where does it go?" And they put it in a coffee. Well, yeah, you can put it in a coffee, but it's actually meant for your pancakes. So I mean, here I am. Maybe I've been many years in Canada. I know the maple syrup, you pour it over your pancake, but they had no idea. And many of them actually left the maple syrup on the table. They just ate the pancake and they left. So sometimes some of these surprises are unforeseen. You don't even realize it. It's going to happen. But it's important to just not assume your students know everything that you know. And then table difficulties. Where does the fork go? I had a problem with that when I first went to Canada. I went to America and I looked at the table and there are 3 forks and 2 spoons and 3 spoons and 1 on top and 2 on the side. And I said, oh, why do they need so many forks and spoons? In Singapore, I just need 1 fork and 1 spoon. I eat everything with a 1 fork and 1 spoon. And then, the fork has to be on the left and not on the right, not on top. Why? So some of these things you take for granted. You have to explain to the students. A very easy lesson: from the outside in. The first dish that comes, they take the outermost fork and spoon. Next one, take the next fork and spoon, and you move outside in, right? Okay, that's how it works. I mentioned before, don't serve exotic food. I give you some examples. Oh, by the way, I used to laugh in a way, quietly in my heart. My friends in America, in Boston, we have Thanksgiving, we have lots of turkey, and the students are invited for turkey dinner, Thanksgiving dinner. They come and they go home and they are still hungry and they have to cook instant noodles in their rooms. Why? Because their American friends didn't realize they don't like turkey and they don't like the stuffing inside the turkey. And for those who don't eat raw vegetables, they've got salad. You can go for Thanksgiving dinner and still come back hungry because there's nothing there you like to eat. So when we have Thanksgiving dinners, we make sure that there's turkey so that they get a taste of turkey and know what it's like and what the stuffing tastes like. But I know they won't get full on turkey. We'll serve other dishes and we serve other sauces. Cranberry sauce is too sour. We serve something else. And actually, in our Thanksgiving dinner, we have Chinese turkey. The turkey has Chinese sausages and mushrooms and soy sauce seasoning inside. So yeah, it's fun. And you will not realize, if you have been, white Canadian, all we did was serve hot rice with hot gravy. And even if there was nothing else to eat with it, the students just love it. It's a treat. Now, when you have to feed a lot of students, they're all hungry people, serve heaps of rice with heaps of gravy. And even if the food runs out, they'll still be happy. It stretches the meal. And of course, I mentioned earlier on, if you have students who are halal conscious, in Islam, actually, there apparently is a rule: if they're far away from home, they don't need to be that strict with the halal food. They can just say, don't serve me pork. I don't care how you cook it. But somebody who's totally halal conscious, even the chicken has to be prayed over and slaughtered while praying and so on. There's a special method. So if you know that your students are halal conscious, yeah, go buy. In Toronto, you can. I'm sure in Quebec, Montreal, you can go to a shop where they sell halal meat and halal food, or even just buy pre-packed meals from the halal shop. And no alcohol. That's what halal means. Okay, so I'll end here and give you time for some questions and comments.